So I'm just like floating through all my stuff. I get done watching a triple jump video, and I look and I've got a comment on one of my videos. A comment on one of my River City Girls tutorials. In Streets of Rage 4, when I knock down a group of enemies, I can time my melee to hit them on the first frame and they get up off the floor, excluding certain enemies that have an invincible wake-up, such as Z, Barbon, etc. In River City Girls, this doesn't seem to work at all. Every enemy in the game has wake-up invincibility, as far as I can tell, and so much HP that you have to knock down even the basic guys 3 or 4 times before they die. I don't understand at all, and it's really, really frustrating. It makes all the enemies take forever to KO. Hibari, for instance, I have to open up around 15 times. It's so tedious. Not a beat 'em up scrub either, because I've gotten S ranks in Streets of Rage 4 Mania. But I've never played a River City, and clearly I'm missing something because I don't understand how this game works. That's the comment. That's what got my brain going in circles about this. In my response, I say to them, yeah, the River City games have never been done that way. There are plenty of other beat-em-ups as well that give enemies leniency, how you can act around them when they wake up as well, but it just means that you have to apply a little patience in your approach, which isn't a bad thing. That aside, if you're finding enemies to be tedious to fight because they have more health, use the money you earn to buy food items. It raises your stats, which you can see in the pause menu, so you'll be able to hit harder, move faster, etc. These are RPG elements that have been present since early River City games. In short, River City Girls isn't meant to be played like Streets of Rage. It's a completely different beast, so use a different approach. I'd like to note, this was noted, like they were saying all this, on the tutorial that I made for the first game, actually goes into detail about the fact that you can buy food items to increase your stats. If this person didn't know this, which clearly they didn't seem to, had they simply watched the video, they might have figured something out that, would have helped them. Sometimes you just get locked into a particular approach and you just filter out everything the game and the others are trying to teach you about how to play the game you're currently playing. Because game B doesn't do the thing, so why is this game doing the thing? Right. That's part of what made me want to talk about beat 'em ups, right? Just in general, because their mindset was, I'm really good at Streets of Rage 4, thus I shouldn't be getting my head kicked in here. I've talked about this multiple times over the years with multiple people. I have this problem when it comes to beat 'em ups and people's general mindsets about them, how they approach them. Final Fight, Streets of Rage, shaped a lot of things in regards to how people approach beat 'em ups and beat 'em up design. People that get into making games with the express purpose of wanting to make beat 'em ups tend to model a lot of things after what those games did. And it's understandable. Those games were, back in their time, the benchmark for what beat 'em ups should be. Streets of Rage 2 stepped things forward a lot for beat 'em ups. A friend of mine saying that they pretty much have a benchmark where if insert beat 'em up is not at least as good as Streets of Rage 2, then they're probably not doing it right. I have my issues with that as a concept, but we'll get into that. For everything Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Double Dragon is another. For everything that these games did for beat 'em ups, they are also very basic in their general approach. You don't have to go out of your way to understand a whole lot, but that doesn't mean that those games can't be optimized. You can sit there and pick a game apart in so many ways. How much damage certain things do to enemies, how enemies move, how they react. Anybody who's played Streets of Rage can tell you, jumping at a Donovan enemy is tantamount to you bashing your head against the wall. That is why I call him He Who Splits the Sky. If you're in the stages of making a beat 'em up and you are doing things that don't line up with what these particular games do to, the friend that I mentioned before, you're not hitting the benchmark. But that's strange to me because you have to consider that every beat 'em up is made differently. For example, Donovan has a natural reaction to people trying to jump near. There are other enemies in Streets of Rage 2 that have reactions to you doing very specific actions. By the same token, if we look at Final Fight, enemies in Final Fight don't tend to do that same thing. Rather, enemies in Final Fight are programmed to move a certain way based on what you're doing. If you knock them down, they'll probably have invo when they get up, but in general, they don't have like hard-coded reactions to you doing very specific things unless it's an extremely specific enemy. And that's something that sets Final Fight and Streets of Rage apart. You're not going to jump at enemies in Final Fight and get, anti-aired for your problems like 90% of the time. You may run into a singular enemy, usually a boss, that will do that kind of thing to you. But outside of that, yeah, you're free to jump at any enemy in the game and kick them in the face and then just kind of deal. So that was another confusing part of the statement for me. It's not like it's not a thing in Streets of Rage, because it is. It 100% is. Even some of the base enemies will 100% like wake up and just punch you in the face if you try to like stand over them. To have that said, I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't apply across the board, so that's weird to me. Now, this next section didn't happen on stream, but these are things that I'd like to additionally touch on, so I've recorded it after and we're doing it now. Another thing that I'd like to touch on is the concept of overlap with fighting games and other genres. The thing that brought this up was an interesting tweet that I saw from a friend of mine, Ben the Aria, who's done a lot for the beat-em-up community, to say the least, and is in the process of making his own game even. In his tweet, he says that beat-em-ups don't need a bunch of fighting game mechanics in order to be good. And, I actually agree with that. Like I said before, we simply wouldn't be where we are today with beat-em-ups if it wasn't for older games that we've gotten. Many of these older games didn't have crazy things like juggles, ground bounces, wall bounces, and so on, but they managed to have depth and to have that it factor in its gameplay that pulled us all in to begin with. It's why games like Turtles in Time are looked at with so much reverence. That said, I'm also of the opinion that having those kinds of mechanics does make beat-em-ups better. If you make a beat-em-up that at its base level is fun and intuitive, and you can add on other mechanics that come from fighting games and it's done well, it can only improve your overall experience, because it can spark that part of your brain that says, oh dang, this is really cool. I wonder what else I can do. And here's the fun thing to think about when considering overlap from other things. Fighting games aren't the only genres that beat-em-ups pull from when you really sit and think about it. When you play a shmup and you're in a pinch, you oftentimes have a bomb on hand, a weapon that clears the screen, gives you room to breathe, and in most cases gives you invulnerability frames so that you can take a second to process what's going on around you without threat. But it takes a resource. In beat-em-ups, as far back as Final Fight and Streets of Rage, there are those games again, you have special moves that are made to knock surrounding enemies away from you. They can be screen clearers like the police car in Streets of Rage, but not always, and whether they are or not, they typically have invulnerability, so you're given room to breathe and process without threat. Interesting, right? This concept of overlap goes into other games and other genres too, so if anyone, who gives this a listen can think of anything, feel free to comment about it below. I'd actually love to hear what you think on it. Anyway, that's it from me. If you like what you've heard, give the vid a like, maybe subscribe, share it around, all that. I typically don't ask, but I figure I'll change it up moving forward with vids like this. 'Cause why not? I should try to be a bit more confident, right? Take it easy, everybody. Have a good day.